The rain had started just after sunset, steady enough to slick the streets of Queens in cold, shimmering streaks. The kind of rain that made most people hurry home. But not Anna Morgan. She stood in soaked sneakers next to the vacuum pump at an all-night car wash on Roosevelt Avenue, wiping down a black sedan that smelled like stale cigars. Her hands were red and raw from the chemicals. She couldn't afford gloves anymore. The last pair had split a week ago, and she hadn't replaced them. No one noticed. No one cared. Inside the small booth where customers paid for service, her 6-year-old son Luka sat cross-legged on a plastic chair, his sketchbook propped against his knees. He was focused, tongue poking out slightly between his lips, drawing the outline of what looked like an engine. Not the kind of engine you'd find in a toy car. Luka's designs were intricate, careful, filled with tiny numbers and labels. Anna hadn't asked him where he'd learned to label each part like that. She already knew. He listened to everything she said when she fixed things in the apartment. He watched. He always watched. Anna wiped the last bit of grime off the back window, straightened up, and pressed her palm into the small of her back. The pain was worse tonight. She hadn't eaten since lunch. She'd meant to, but there was no time. The only thing that mattered was finishing the shift and making it to the end of the week. If she could get enough cash together, she'd make rent by Friday. Maybe buy Luka new sneakers. His toes were nearly pushing through the old ones. She just needed a little more time. A little more luck. At 10:43 p.m., the car pulled in. A black limousine. It moved slow, smooth. It parked at the farthest bay. She thought maybe it was a mistake. People like that didn't come to places like this. But it wasn't. The engine shut off. The door opened. Donald Trump stepped out. She recognized him immediately. Not from TV, though she'd seen him there, but from his picture on magazines at the bodega near their apartment. His suit was sharp. His hair wasn't quite like the jokes made it seem. He stood there for a second, looking around like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. Like he had all the time in the world. Anna didn't stare. She went back to wiping down the vacuum handle. The last thing she needed was to get caught staring at someone who could buy and sell everything in her life without thinking twice. She kept her head down. Her hands moved automatically. Clean. Move. Clean again. Who's the engineer? He asked suddenly. Anna turned. Trump was looking at Luka. More specifically, at Luka's sketchbook. He took a few steps toward the booth without waiting for an answer. Luka glanced up, his pencil stopping halfway across the page. He didn't speak. He never spoke first to strangers. Anna walked toward them slowly, wiping her hands on the back of her jeans. My son, Anna said simply. Trump nodded. He didn't seem to expect more than that. He crouched slightly, his hands resting on his knees as he looked at Luka's drawing. What's this? Luka shifted in his chair. It's an electric motor, he said quietly. If you change the wiring here, he pointed at a loop of lines, it's faster. More efficient. Trump glanced up at Anna. You teach him that. Anna crossed her arms over her chest, unsure if she should answer. I used to study electrical engineering. A long time ago. She shrugged. He picks things up. Trump straightened up. Why'd you stop? The question hit harder than it should have. She looked away, jaw tightening. Because life happened, she said flatly. It wasn't a choice. Trump was quiet for a few seconds. His expression didn't change. Then he glanced at the car wash bay and the plastic chair where Luka sat. What's your name? Anna, she answered, her voice careful. He nodded. Come on, he said. Let's clean the car. For a moment, Anna didn't move. Then she realized he meant his limo. He wasn't joking. He walked toward the bay, opened the driver's side door, and pressed a button. The back popped open. Get the vacuum, he added without looking back. Anna hesitated, then followed. She grabbed the hose and started. The inside of the limo was spotless. It didn't need cleaning. But she did the job anyway, because there was no way she was turning down money. Not now. Not ever. By the time she finished, Luka had closed his sketchbook and was watching. Trump stood nearby, arms crossed, saying nothing. When Anna shut the door and wiped the last streak from the window, Trump pulled a money clip from his pocket. He peeled off 4 $100 bills. No tip was ever that big. Not here. She shook her head. That's too much. No, he said firmly. It's not. She stared at the money for a few seconds, then took it. Her hand shook slightly as she folded the bills and shoved them deep into her jacket pocket. She was already thinking about rent. Maybe enough for groceries too. Trump looked at Luka again. You want to keep drawing engines? Luka nodded slowly. You want to build one? Trump asked. Luka looked at his mother first. She didn't say anything. Then he nodded again. Trump reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Anna. "Come here tomorrow," he said. 10 o'clock. "What for?" Anna asked. Her voice was skeptical, but not rude. Trump smiled faintly. "An opportunity." He got back into the limo. The engine started. The car rolled away as quietly as it had arrived. Anna stood there for a long time after the lights faded. Luka tugged her sleeve. What was that about? She stared at the card in her hand. The address was in Manhattan. She had never been there for anything other than cleaning offices. "I don't know," she said finally. "But we'll find out." The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It came down harder now, slanting against the windows of their apartment like it was trying to get inside. Anna woke early, long before Luka stirred. She sat at the small kitchen table, the business card lying flat in front of her. She turned it over more times than she could count. The address, printed in sharp black letters, looked cold and formal. She read it over and over. She told herself it was probably nothing. People with money made promises they forgot about the second they climbed back into their cars. But there was nothing else waiting for her that day. No shift scheduled. No calls about extra hours. No excuses. By the time Luka woke and sat down beside her with a bowl of cereal he ate without complaint, she had already decided. They were going. Anna didn't own clothes that made sense for places like Manhattan. She wore her cleanest jeans, the ones without visible stains, and a plain black sweater Luka had outgrown 2 winters ago, but still fit her narrow shoulders. She brushed Luka's hair back with damp fingers, wiped the smudge of dirt from his cheek with the corner of her sleeve, and told him to put his drawings in his backpack. He obeyed without question. The subway ride was long. Luka pressed his nose to the scratched glass and watched the buildings change as they crossed into another world. Anna kept one hand on the strap of his backpack the entire time, afraid of losing him in the crowd. He never complained. He never pulled away. They arrived 10 minutes before the time printed on the card. The building was taller than anything Anna had ever stood beneath. Glass, steel, polished marble on the inside. There was no front desk, no security guard asking why she was there. A woman in a gray suit stood waiting near the entrance. She asked Anna's name. She already knew it. She told them to follow. The elevator ride was silent. Luka squeezed her hand once. She didn't squeeze back. She wasn't sure she could. When the doors opened, the space inside wasn't an office. It was a workshop, clean, brightly lit, and full of machines Anna had only ever seen in textbooks. CNC routers, 3D printers, laser cutters. On one of the workbenches was a half-assembled electric motor. Luka's eyes widened when he saw it. He didn't move closer, but he couldn't take his eyes off it. The woman led them to a conference room with glass walls. It was empty, except for a stack of papers and a thin folder. Anna sat down because she didn't know what else to do. Luka stood beside her chair, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his shoulder against her arm. Donald Trump walked in 5 minutes later. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He opened the folder and slid the papers across the table toward her. She stared at them for a long moment before picking one up. It wasn't what she expected. It wasn't a job offer. It wasn't a charity form. It was a proposal. He wanted to back her idea, not just give her money. He wanted to fund her own repair shop. Not a franchise. Not an investment where he took half of everything she made. Her name would be on the door. She would own it. Start small. Fix basic electronics first. Phones, laptops, appliances. Expand into something more specialized later, if she proved she could handle it. The paperwork was simple. No loans. No debt. The terms were clear. He fronted the costs to rent the space, buy equipment, handle the paperwork. In return, she had one obligation: make it work. She didn't trust it at first. She read every line twice, then 3 more times. There was no trick. No clause that would pull the rug out from under her later. It was exactly what it looked like. A chance. Anna couldn't remember the last time someone had offered her anything that wasn't a temporary fix. She didn't know if she was supposed to say something. She didn't know if her voice would even work. She looked at Luka. His eyes were bright, but quiet. He was waiting for her, like he always did. She signed. The weeks that followed didn't feel real. She expected them to call back and tell her it was a mistake. She expected the locks to change on the small shop space they handed over. But the key worked every time. The place was in an old neighborhood, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a hardware store. The front windows were filthy the first day she saw them. The walls inside needed paint. The back room smelled like something had died in the pipes. She cleaned it anyway. She painted the walls herself. Luka helped where he could, holding up a flashlight while she rewired old fixtures and replaced broken outlets. The first deliveries arrived 2 days later. Tool benches, soldering stations, boxes of parts, wire spools, circuit boards. Anna unpacked everything slowly, afraid she'd break something. She didn't. Her hands were steady, steadier than they'd been in years. She worked at night, long after Luka had fallen asleep on a pile of old coats in the corner. She practiced on anything she could get her hands on. She took apart her own broken blender and fixed the motor. She repaired a neighbor's cracked phone screen. Word started to spread before she even opened the doors officially. By the end of the month, the shop had a name. Morgan Repairs. Simple, direct. She painted the letters herself, standing on a rusted ladder she borrowed from the hardware store next door. The owner, an older man named Sal, held the base steady without being asked. She opened on a Tuesday. No ribbon cutting. No balloons. Just a piece of cardboard taped to the door that read, "Open," in thick black marker. The first customer brought in an old stereo that wouldn't power on. She charged him less than it was worth because she was afraid he wouldn't come back if she didn't. He left a $20 tip without saying a word. That night, when she locked the front door, Luka stood beside her with his sketchbook in one hand. He showed her a new drawing. It was of the shop. Her shop. She didn't cry. She wouldn't let herself. Not yet. But the next morning, she stood outside for a moment before unlocking the door and let herself believe it was real. Donald Trump didn't show up again that month. He didn't need to. Anna already knew what she had to do. The days blurred into weeks, and the shop slowly became more than just a place with tools and a workbench. It became something real, something alive. The first few customers had been hesitant, people from the neighborhood who walked past the windows for days before finally stepping inside. Anna saw the way they looked at her, uncertain, as if trying to decide whether she knew what she was doing. She understood their hesitation. A woman, alone, in a trade dominated by men. A new business with no reputation, no history, nothing to back it up except her own skills and the quiet belief that she could make this work. The first repairs were small. A cracked phone screen. A laptop that refused to turn on. A shorted-out microwave someone was about to throw away. She took every job that came through the door, no matter how minor. She charged less than she should have, knowing that trust had to be earned first. Some people left without saying much. Others lingered, watching her work, waiting to see if she could actually fix what they had given up on. One by one, they started coming back. Luka spent his afternoons in the back, sketching while she worked. He watched her movements carefully, absorbing everything without needing to ask questions. He had always been quiet, but now his silence carried something else, certainty. He knew what she was doing wasn't temporary. He knew they weren't just surviving anymore. They were building something. The landlord came by one morning, knocking twice on the glass before stepping inside. Anna braced herself for bad news, but he only nodded toward the growing stack of repairs behind the counter. He said she was good for the neighborhood. He said he'd send more business her way. She didn't know if he meant it or if he just liked the rent coming in on time, but it didn't matter. The result was the same. By the third month, she hired a second set of hands. Carlos, an older mechanic from a few blocks away, had spent his life fixing things in his garage. He walked in one day, looked around, and said it was good to see a woman in the trade. He stayed late that evening, helping her solder a motherboard without being asked. She didn't argue when he came back the next day. The money wasn't huge, but it was steady. Rent was covered without the usual pit in her stomach. Groceries were bought without calculating down to the last cent. Luka's sneakers were finally replaced. The first time she set down a full week's pay in cash on the kitchen table, she stared at it for a long time before touching it. It had been years since she had seen that much money that wasn't already promised to someone else. She was still careful, still waiting for something to go wrong. Life had trained her to expect it. The struggle never fully disappeared, but the weight of it wasn't as suffocating as before. And then, one evening, everything changed again. It was close to closing time when a car pulled up outside. Not a regular customer. The kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this. Sleek, black, with tinted windows that reflected the glow of the streetlights. Anna felt the old instinct kick in, the one that told her to keep her head down and mind her business. But the back door opened, and she didn't need to see his face to know who it was. Donald Trump stepped out, moving with the same confidence he always carried. He wasn't in a hurry. He never was. He walked through the door like he had been here before, like he already knew what to expect. Anna didn't know why he was here. She didn't ask. He looked around, taking in everything. The workbenches, the stacks of circuit boards waiting for repair, the faint smell of solder in the air. He saw Luka in the back, still sketching, still lost in his own world. He saw Carlos, who had just finished fixing a customer's broken stereo. And then he saw her, standing behind the counter, arms crossed, waiting. He didn't need to ask if the business was doing well. It was obvious. The proof was everywhere, on the shelves filled with repaired devices, on the workbenches covered in tools, on the clipboard by the register listing jobs booked for the next 2 weeks. He handed her a file without explanation. She opened it. Inside were more documents, thicker than before. Business expansion, licensing, a second location. Everything laid out in careful detail, as if it had been prepared long before today. She stared at the papers, reading line after line, understanding the weight of what was in front of her. This wasn't just another push forward. This was the next level, a way to turn what she had built into something bigger. She wasn't sure how long she stood there before looking back up. His expression hadn't changed. He was waiting. This time, she didn't hesitate. She signed. And just like that, the future shifted again. The second location opened 6 months later. It was in a different neighborhood, one with more foot traffic and more competition. Anna didn't care. She had spent weeks preparing, inspecting every inch of the space before signing off on the lease. She didn't have time to doubt herself. She was too busy working. The crew she hired for the renovation followed her instructions precisely. Every decision mattered. The layout of the benches, the placement of the shelving, the lighting. She had learned the hard way that the smallest details often determined whether something worked or fell apart. Luka stood next to her the morning the sign went up. He held the stencil in place while she painted the letters herself, steady and deliberate, ignoring the pain in her shoulders. She wanted it done right. No shortcuts. The same rules she followed when repairing anything, patience, precision, pride, applied to this too. The doors opened quietly. There was no grand opening, no advertisements. The only sign was the one in the window that simply said, "Now open." But people came. They came because they had heard about the other shop. They came because they knew someone who had brought in a broken laptop and walked out with it working like new. They came because word traveled fast when you did things right and treated people fairly. The second shop was busier than the first. Anna split her time between both locations, moving between them with ruthless efficiency. She worked open to close, then spent hours at night reviewing inventory orders, balance sheets, and employee schedules. She learned how to negotiate better lease terms. She learned how to handle suppliers who thought they could talk over her. She learned to say no when it mattered. No one was going to take what she had built. Not now. Not ever. Luka kept sketching, his notebooks filled with more complex diagrams. He asked for books on electrical engineering, books Anna couldn't afford before, but ordered now without hesitation. She made sure he had every tool he needed. She saw the way his mind worked, methodical, curious, unafraid to take something apart just to see how it worked. One night, when the shops were closed and Luka was asleep, Anna sat at the kitchen table going through receipts. The apartment was the same one they had always lived in, but it felt different now. The rent was paid on time. The fridge was full. The lights were never turned off to save money. She thought about moving, about finding something bigger, something newer. But she stayed. She wasn't finished here yet. Donald Trump didn't visit again. He didn't need to. His involvement had ended when she signed the paperwork for the second location. The rest was on her. She preferred it that way. Carlos ran the first shop most days now. He had a way with customers that made people feel at ease. Anna trusted him. She didn't trust many people, but he had earned it. He treated the shop like it was his own. He never asked for more than a fair wage, and he always showed up on time. By the end of the year, Anna had 12 employees between both locations. She hired 2 apprentices, both single mothers, who were struggling the same way she had struggled. She taught them what she knew. She expected them to work hard, and they did. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered opportunity. It was enough. The reputation of Morgan Repairs grew beyond the neighborhoods. Small businesses started bringing their equipment to her. Offices sent broken electronics. She landed a maintenance contract with a local school, which meant steady work and visibility. She handled every negotiation personally. She never allowed herself to be dismissed or talked over in meetings. She spoke clearly and directly. People listened. Luka watched her in those meetings when she brought him along. She saw the way he paid attention, the way he studied her tone, and the way she controlled a room without raising her voice. He was learning more than circuits and wires. He was learning how to lead. On the anniversary of the first shop opening, Anna stood outside early in the morning before unlocking the door. The paint on the sign had faded slightly, and the door creaked when she pulled it open. She made a mental note to fix both that week. She never let small things slide for long. Inside, the counter was covered with repairs waiting to be picked up. The shelves were stocked. The workbenches were clean. Carlos was already in the back, unpacking a shipment. He nodded when she walked in, and she returned the gesture. There was nothing to say. They both knew the work ahead. Later that day, a delivery arrived. A single box. No label. No sender. She opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photo. It was a picture of her and Luka, taken without her knowledge during one of their first days at the second shop. They were both standing behind the counter. Luka was holding one of his sketches, and she was pointing at something on the page. Neither of them was smiling. They were focused, serious. It wasn't posed. It was real. Underneath the photo was a simple note. 6 words. She read them twice before setting it down. She didn't need to read it again. The work continued. She closed up late that night, locking both doors herself before heading home. Luka walked beside her, his backpack heavy with books. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The shops were successful. The future was theirs. And Anna knew, deep in her bones, that they had earned it. Every inch of it. The third year brought changes Anna never imagined when she first stood alone in that dark car wash, scrubbing windows for tips. The 2 shops she had built from nothing were now part of the neighborhood's landscape, as familiar as the corner grocery or the school playground. People relied on them. People trusted them. And people respected her. That last part still surprised her some days. Respect was never something freely given in her life. She had fought for every ounce of it. She woke earlier now, not out of necessity, but out of habit. The mornings were quieter than they used to be. No rush to juggle shifts or scrape together coins for rent. Luka was older, his steps heavier as he walked through the apartment to get ready for school. His notebooks had turned into laptops, his drawings more complex, more technical. He barely asked for help anymore. He worked late into the night on designs for machines he wanted to build one day, machines she could barely understand now. She never told him that. It wasn't important. What mattered was that he knew she was there, always. Anna had started spending more time outside the shops. The 2 women she'd hired as apprentices had grown into more than just employees. One managed the first location now, while Carlos took over the second. They didn't need her for day-to-day operations anymore. She could have used the time to rest, but instead, she found herself visiting other small businesses in the area. Some were struggling the way she had in the beginning. Some needed repairs they couldn't afford. She started fixing things for them without asking for anything in return. She refused payment. She refused discounts. She did it because someone had once given her a chance when no one else would. It was the only repayment she believed in. The first time she helped another woman apply for a small business grant, she did it quietly, without making it public. The woman got approved. Anna didn't say much about it afterward. She just nodded and told her to make it count. Word spread, slowly but steadily. People started coming to her not just for repairs, but for advice. She didn't give them false hope. She told them the truth, that it was hard, that it was ugly sometimes, that they would want to quit. And then she showed them how to push through it anyway. One afternoon, a reporter called her. They wanted to do a story about the woman who'd opened 2 successful shops and had become a mentor to small business owners in the area. She declined the interview twice before agreeing to meet. The article was published a month later. It ran with a headline about single mothers and second chances. She didn't care for the title, but the piece was honest, and that was enough. On a cold Thursday morning, Anna received a letter. It was delivered by hand, not by mail. The envelope was thick, the paper expensive. She didn't need to read the return address to know who had sent it. Inside was an invitation to an event she had no intention of attending. It was being held at one of the largest venues in the city, the kind of place where people wore tailored suits and spoke in rehearsed sound bites. She set the invitation aside, unfinished paperwork waiting on her desk. It sat there for 2 weeks before she touched it again. The morning she decided to go, Luka told her it was about time she let people see what she had done. She didn't argue. He was right. The event was full of people she didn't know or didn't care to know. Big names. Important people. But when she walked through the doors, she wasn't intimidated. She had walked into rooms harder than this. Rooms full of creditors and landlords, empty bank accounts and eviction notices. Nothing here could scare her now. She didn't see Donald Trump right away. He wasn't at the podium or near the center of attention. When she finally spotted him, he was sitting toward the back, watching everything without saying much. Just like he had done that first night. They didn't exchange words. They didn't need to. He nodded once when she caught his eye. She returned the gesture. Later that evening, they handed her an award. Some engraved plaque she hadn't asked for, recognizing her for community impact and business leadership. She accepted it without fanfare, spoke briefly, and left early. The recognition wasn't what mattered. What mattered was what came next. A month later, Anna opened a third location. Not a repair shop this time, but a training center. A place where anyone could learn the skills that had saved her life. Electronics repair, basic engineering, business management. She didn't charge tuition. She funded it herself, with profits from the shops and donations from those who believed in what she was doing. The program filled up within weeks. Luka spent his weekends helping her teach. His understanding of the machines was more advanced now, but he never talked down to anyone. He explained things with patience and clarity, the same way she had once explained them to him, back when it was just the two of them in a small apartment with flickering lights and not enough food in the fridge. Years passed. The shops expanded. The center trained hundreds. Anna didn't move out of their old apartment until much later, when Luka convinced her it was time. Even then, she kept the rent low for the next tenants. A single mother with 2 kids moved in after them. Anna handed her the keys herself and left a month's rent paid in advance. She never forgot where it started. She never forgot the weight she carried back then, or the fear that came with it. But she had learned to carry something else too, responsibility. And she never let it go. Donald Trump never visited her shops again. He didn't have to. She had become exactly what he told her she could be. Someone who didn't just survive. Someone who made sure no one else was left behind. The woman who once scrubbed windshields at a car wash now ran a business empire that stretched beyond the streets of Queens. But that wasn't the point. The point was that her son, and others like him, had a future now. A future that didn't depend on luck or charity. A future they built with their own hands. And that, Anna decided, was worth everything it took to get there.